Greeting and salutations to everyone. Welcome to my YouTube channel. International relations has always been an important topic, and learning from others' mistakes and strategies in international relations and conflict has been more important now than ever. So here is the video on the most recent conflict of Russia and Ukraine. Focused on how will Putin's mobilization impact Ukraine? Recently, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a partial military mobilization and dialed up the nuclear threat. Separately, 4 Russia-backed breakaway regions in Ukraine, Donetsk and Luhansk in east and Kherson and Zaporizhia in south, are holding referendums on joining Russia. These decisions followed Russia's first major battlefield defeat in Ukraine earlier this month, with Mr. Putin's troops forced to retreat from the territories they captured in the Kharkiv Oblast by a lightning Ukrainian counteroffensive. Now the question arises, why did Mr. Putin announce mobilization? During Russia's special military operation of mobilizing 150,000 troops on the border, his plan appeared to be making quick territorial gain in Ukraine through a limited war. Russian troops tried to make a sharp thrust into Ukraine from multiple fronts: in the north, towards Kyiv and Kharkiv; in the east, towards Donbas; and in the south, towards Kherson, Zaporizhia, and Mykolaiv. The Russians made substantial territorial gains in the east and south. The 4 regions that are holding referendums make up some 15% of Ukraine's landmass, but they had to pay a heavy price for those gains, which themselves fell short of the original objectives. Ukraine's troops, backed by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, stopped the Russians on the outskirts of Kyiv, repelled them from Kharkiv, and put up a prolonged resistance in the east. Despite the slow progress, Russia had maintained that its operation was going according to plan, until its troops were pushed back from the Kharkiv Oblast. The military setback, which strengthened the right nationalist criticism of the way the war was conducted, forced the Kremlin to come out of the fiction that everything was going as planned. The front line is now as long as 1,000 kilometers, stretching from the northern edges of the Oskil River to the borders of Mykolaiv in the south, and Russia, which is suffering from supply problems and manpower shortage, finds it difficult to hold the line in the face of Ukrainian counterattacks. Mr. Putin acknowledged the limits of his operation and the challenges his troops face in Ukraine in his address. The reality is that Russia has reached a level where it cannot sustain its military gains without further troop mobilization. And Mr. Putin has gone for it. Speaking about partial military mobilization, both Mr. Putin and his defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, have said that only those who are currently in the reserves, and those who have served in the armed forces and have got military training would be conscripted. Mr. Shoigu says, Russia can mobilize some 25 million people from the country's vast reserves, but the defense ministry is planning to call in only 1% of that potential, some 300,000 troops. It may not have been an easy decision for Mr. Putin, who is now in a difficult situation. The generals need more manpower, and hardliners are exerting pressure on him to commit more troops and resources. Some have even expressed rare public criticism, such as the Chechen leader, Ramzan Kadyrov. On the other side, a general mobilization, which would need nationwide conscription, could be unpopular. This explains why Mr. Putin delayed the mobilization so long and hasn't declared war on Ukraine. He cannot afford to take further battlefield defeats either. So he struck a balance by opting for a partial mobilization, which also triggered some protests. Immediately after, pro-Russian separatists in Ukraine's breakaway regions decided to hold referendums on joining Russia. This move itself is a major escalation. The 300,000 troops the Russian Defense Ministry is mobilizing is almost twice the size of the original mobilization Russia made before launching this war. Now, we must know, how will referendums impact the situation? Of the 4 regions holding the vote, Russia has recognized Donetsk and Luhansk as independent republics, which make up the industrial Donbas region. Since the war began, Russia and separatists have captured almost all of Luhansk and some 65% of Donetsk. They also control parts of Kherson, including the port city that fell in the initial days of the war, and Zaporizhia, including the eponymous nuclear plant, Europe's largest. The separatists have been planning to hold the referendums for some time, but Russia's setbacks in Kharkiv seem to have quickened their move, with blessings from Moscow. While there won't be any surprise in the results, what needs to be seen is if and when Moscow recognizes the referendums and annexes these territories. If Moscow does it, Ukraine's borders would be redrawn for good, and it would require greater commitment from the Kremlin to defend those territories or capture the rest of these regions that are still controlled by Ukrainians. It's not a surprise that both the referendums and Mr. Putin's additional mobilization were announced simultaneously. They are part of the same strategy. While Mr. Putin's declaration of mobilization is a major escalation, a careful examination of his speech shows mixed signals. Mr. Putin referred to the March talks between Russia and Ukraine, where both sides agreed to further discuss peace proposals, which, according to him, was sabotaged by the US and the UK. Here, the reference is to the Istanbul talks, in which Ukraine had made a proposal to adopt neutrality in return for multilateral security guarantees, discuss the status of Donbas with Mr. Putin, and agree to a 15-year consultation period for Crimea. After the talks, Russia announced its withdrawal from around Kyiv and Kharkiv. But then, footage of the Bucha bodies emerged, after which the peace process collapsed. While we don't know the fine print, Mr. Putin's positive reference to the peace process is an indication that the hope for a negotiated settlement is not yet dead. In the speech he said he would use all available means to protect the territorial integrity of Russia, which was a direct threat to Ukraine against attacking Crimea, which Russia had annexed in 2014. While he backed the referendums, he didn't say if and when he would recognize the results. This leaves a window of opportunity for the peace process, which will not stay open forever. If Russia, with additional troops, turns around the course of the war, it could strengthen the hands of the Kremlin, which could go for annexation of the territories, shutting the path to peace. If the mobilization fails, it would make Mr. Putin's position at home vulnerable, forcing him to take more drastic measures. This means the current phase of the war offers both an opportunity to pursue peace and a slide into dangerous escalation, depending on which path the stakeholders would follow. So, that was the video. Write down in the comment, what do you think about the Putin's mobilization? For more video like this, subscribe to my YouTube channel. See you next week. Thanks for watching.